If you know how to do the French knot well, then it's a great stitch and it's so much fun to include in your projects. I like to cluster them up actually as a nice way to fill in space, an alternative to doing the satin stitch or the long and short stitch all the time. If you don't know how to do a French knot well though, it can quickly become your worst nightmare. So with this video, I'm hoping to make the French knot a little less enigmatic for everybody. So first, I'm going to get as close here to the camera as I can. So if you'll see here, I've already anchored my thread. So I'm going to, there we go. I'm going to pull up here through my fabric. And then what I need to do is I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to wrap it starting in front of my needle. I'm going to wrap it around my needle one time like this. And then while that is wrapped around the needle like this, I'm going to reinsert my needle into the fabric, not exactly in the same spot where the thread came up, but a couple of fibers over to one side. If I were to put my needle right back in the exact same spot, all that's going to happen is I'm going to pop all of my thread straight through to the other side, and I won't have anything nice to look at on my project. While the needle is still halfway in the fabric, I'm going to keep my hand on the needle, and with my other hand, I'm going to pull the thread tight and snug. So now it's pulled really tightly around the body of my needle. And once I reach that point, now I'm going to pull my needle the rest of the way through. Notice my thumb here. Notice that my thumb is holding down that thread nice and taut as I pull this needle through. So I'm going to pull the needle through and I'm going to start pulling my thread through. And while I'm doing that, notice my thumb is still in place there, holding that thread taut. And as I get to the end, and there's not much left, then I can let go and pull it the rest of the way. And there is my first French knot. I'll do this one more time. Come right up here. I wrap, starting going across the front of my needle. And then I wrap around the back and underneath like that. I'll show that wrap one more time. Make sure my shadow is not in your way. Wrap up across the top, pull it underneath, and then pull it back towards myself. And then with it wrapped around like that, it's okay if it's still loose around my needle at this point. I'm going to insert my needle a couple of fibers over from the point where the thread first came up. With the needle halfway in place, I'm now going to hold onto my needle with this hand is going to hold onto my needle. And then with this hand, I'm going to pull the thread tight and snug around the needle. There's my thumb now in place, holding that thread nice and tight. And now with my other hand, I pull the needle through and I pull the thread through the rest of the way. And there's another French knot. Now, this was a single wrap French knot. If you want your knots to be a little bit bigger, you can actually do a double wrap French knot. So I'll show that very quickly. The technique is exactly the same. There's only going to be one slight variation here to do a double wrap. So I've pulled my thread all the way up. Now I'm holding onto my needle. I'm getting my thread ready to wrap it. Once again, start by going up and over the top and pull it back towards myself. And that was my first wrap, a single wrap. But now I want a double wrap, so I'm going to wrap around the back again, back over the top a second time, and back underneath towards me a second time. And now with it wrapped twice around my needle, now I am going to go a couple fibers over, put that needle down into the fabric. Same as before. I hold the needle with one hand, and with my other hand, I'm going to pull that string a bit tight. Not too tight, because if I really were yanking it tight, then I'm going to have trouble passing the eye of my needle through the knot. But I do want to have a really good snugness here. It is pretty taut. Now I pull my needle through just like before, and there is a slightly larger double wrap French knot. I'll do it one more time just for good measure. So I've pulled my thread up. I take my thread around my needle once, around my needle twice. I put my needle a couple of fibers over, almost the same spot, but with a little bit of fabric clearly visible between where the thread goes up and where the needle's going back down. Now I pull my string tight. I got my thumb there holding it in place. And there we go. And that is how you make a French knot.